Hello and welcome back to the Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me this morning is Matt Addison, and we're of course going to be previewing Liverpool's clash with Leeds United at Elland Road tonight, kick-off at 8 p.m. And Matt, I suppose we'll be looking for Liverpool to just sort of pick up where they left off in that second half against Arsenal and carry on from there, really.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see that sort of performance for almost a full 90 minutes, wouldn't it? I think we've seen it a little bit. That was certainly the longest that we've seen it, and certainly against the best team in the country so far this season in Arsenal. It was really impressive what Liverpool did last week. They've had a long week to train. They've got Thiago now back. I thought he made a real difference in that second half when he came on to be able to sustain those attacks and keep Liverpool playing in that way. So, yeah, it'd be good to see him start. I think it'd be good to see Liverpool try and do what they've done in that game and kick on. But we have been here a few times this season. We've seen them play well. We've seen them beat Manchester United 7-0 and then the next game play really, really poorly. So I'm reasonably confident. I think Liverpool are going to have to play quite well. I think Leeds will be a lot better than what they were last week. Obviously, Monday Night Football under the lights for them. Elland Road is always a tricky place to go. But yeah, I'd like to think that Liverpool can kick on and do a little bit more. They've got pretty much everyone that they would want to be available is now available. They've got players coming back. They've got Diaz, presumably in the matchday squad, will come off the bench hopefully at some point this evening. They've got, an opportunity, I think, to build on what they did last week. But will they do that? That the evidence of this season would suggest maybe not. But I am still hopeful, and as I'm sure we'll get on to, I am still reasonably hopeful that if Liverpool could go on a bit of a run, the Champions League isn't quite dead yet, even though it's very unlikely. I think, if Liverpool can get themselves into a bit of a run, they do probably have a bit of a favourable run of fixtures remaining this season compared to their rivals.
Yeah, I'd literally just been looking at the table before we came on here. I think if we win today, we can go within 9 points with 8 games to play. So nothing's out of the realm of possibility. I think it still would be quite an uphill battle for Liverpool to get back into that top 4. But I suppose you really brought me on to my next question there, which was, are you thinking we're going to see a Leeds side that have got far more to play for than Liverpool? Because, you look at where they are in the table. They're in, 16th, 29 points. They're 2 points ahead of Everton in 17th. If they win, they can go above West Ham. So they are banging that relegation battle. Do you think they're going to have a little bit more to play for, or will Liverpool, having that slight prospect of top 4 and I suppose looking for revenge from the reverse fixture earlier in the season when they beat us at Anfield, do you think that'll be enough motivation for the Reds?
You'd like to think so. It certainly should be. I think there is still an opportunity to get into the top 4, and I think for us, it's probably quite easy to sit here and say, or for Liverpool fans generally, it's quite easy to say, well, if you don't get in the top 4, you'd maybe not rather be in the Europa League or the Conference League. You might want to miss out completely. But Jurgen Klopp and the players won't be thinking along those lines. I think for us having to do content around Liverpool every day, it would be quite helpful if they could be in some sort of European competition next season as well. So I expect them to still put in everything across the course of the remaining fixtures. And like I say, I really do think, if they can get onto a bit of a run, you look at all of the teams around them. Newcastle have got some hard fixtures coming up. I think Newcastle play Tottenham next week. There's a lot for Liverpool to do to get into that top 4, but you can't give up at this point. I think you've got to go on and try and just win as many of the games as they can. And in any other season, you'd be looking at the final 9 games and thinking, yeah, Liverpool could quite easily go and win all 9. I think the hardest one is Tottenham, but that's at Anfield. You'd expect Liverpool to be able to do something against them, particularly when you think of the inconsistencies that they've had. They've just lost at home to Bournemouth this weekend. They've had so many poor results, but are somehow ahead of Liverpool still in the table. But I just think, in any normal period over the last few years, Liverpool, you'd look at them and think that they had a real chance. And obviously they wouldn't be in this position that they'd need to go and win all 9 to get into the top 4. But yeah, there's still an opportunity. And I think, for Liverpool, it has to be at some point that they start to show a few signs. Even if they don't get into the top 4, just looking ahead to next season, you'd like to think that the last few games of this season will be good to get Diaz some minutes and get him looking back to his best. There's individuals as well that have been fit that just desperately need a goal, like Diogo Jota. I think it could be really important for someone like him to have a strong end to this season in terms of what happens in the start of next season and beyond as well. I think there's a bit of a question mark over kind of where he fits in when you think of Diaz coming back and Darwin Núñez being there and Cody Gakpo. I think for someone like Jota, the last few games of this season, just to put in a bit of a reminder really of what he can do could be really important for what happens in the future. So there's still plenty to play for, I think, in terms of the table, but even individually, I think for a number of these Liverpool players, the ones that are going to be here next season are the ones that are probably going to play the most minutes between now and the end of the season. So I think for them, there's still plenty to play for in terms of their own futures and their own sort of positions within this squad. And we've seen Curtis Jones get a bit of action recently and come back into it a little bit more. You think of players like him in that situation, there's going to be so much upheaval, I think, during the summer for Liverpool. But I think the last 9 games of this season can really play into the perceptions heading into next season. And that's what you want. Ultimately, if they do not get into the top 4, you still want them to have that strong finish to be able to kind of roll on into next season, because we've seen that time and time again in the past. There's been so many seasons where Liverpool have finished strongly one season and started positively the next. I think we absolutely need that to be the case again for Liverpool this time around.
Yeah, you mentioned this run of 9 games we've got to end the season, and there are some slightly favourable fixtures, as you say. There's only really Spurs out of the bigger teams in there, and we were doing poetry in motion on Friday actually, and Fitzy read those fixtures out, and in my head, I still sort of had a last season head on. I was like, oh, we'll win all them. We'll win all 9 of those, and we'll get in the Champions League. And last year, that probably is what they would have gone on and done. But I mean, this year certainly coming into the year. It seemed certainly like coming into the season. It seemed certainly like there was still only really 2 teams in the league that are capable of going and winning 10 games in a row, and that was us and City. And I think I saw a stat this season that no teams won more than 6 in a row, I don't think, in the Premier League. So I think it's just been a bit of a stranger season, a bit more even up top. And like you say, that has given us a bit of an outside chance at getting back into that top 4. But you mentioned Diogo Jota, and I wanted to ask you about him again because I asked you about him last time we were on here together. And do you think, would you just like to see him played into form for the rest of the season, start pretty much every game? Because I sort of think that might be one of the better things Liverpool could get out of this season if they're not going to go on and qualify for the top 4. If they can maybe just get Jota a couple of goals and play him back into form ahead of next season, I think that'd be really helpful for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a hard one to work out with him because they've got so many good options now in attack. I think you've got to kind of use Roberto Firmino as a substitute, and kind of he's leaving at the end of the season. We know that, kind of put that to one side, and I think that would probably be the case anyway. I think he's the lowest down in terms of the pecking order at the moment. But then you'd look at some of the other players that they've got. Obviously, Luis Diaz, we don't expect him to be at his absolute best until the summer, probably. I think he'll probably come off the bench in most, if not all, of the remaining games this season as they ease him back in. But there's a real question mark, I think, over Darwin Núñez in terms of what his position looks like when Diaz comes back, because he's not really played through the middle for a long time. Diogo Jota obviously hasn't scored for ages, and you'd want to see that from him. But Cody Gakpo, I think, has been really good since he came in. I know he's not maybe scored as many goals as what he might have liked, but I think he's on 3 or 4 already. He's got into some good positions. I think the kind of link-up play that we've seen with him, the kind of flashes of what Roberto Firmino can do when he was at his best. I think there's 3 really good options there, but there's no absolute standout option. There's none of, if you had to make me guess now who would start as Liverpool's number 9 the first game of next season, it's pretty even, I think, between Jota, Gakpo and Núñez at the moment, if you assume that Diaz will be on the left and Salah will be on the right. I'm not quite sure which way it might go or which way Liverpool might look to line up. Maybe they go with a 4 and you pick 2 out of the 3, but even then there's going to be one of them that's sort of lowest down, 5th out of the 5 choices. So I don't know which way Liverpool are thinking about going in the future, and I don't know right now even which one would I pick. It's really, really hard. I suppose you'd edge towards Darwin Núñez in terms of the price tag and the age and the potential that he's got, but I don't know. For me in recent times, Cody Gakpo probably just edges it, but then maybe doesn't score as many goals as the other 2 when they're at the best. There's kind of pros and cons depending on which team that you're playing against. I think for me, in terms of tonight, you'd look at the way that Leeds play, the way that Liverpool are probably going to have to do quite a lot of counter-attacking. I'd probably go with Cody Gakpo, but I take your point with Diogo Jota, and he is one of those players that he maybe doesn't offer as much as the other 2 do in terms of the build-up, but he can just pop up with a goal out of nowhere. And how Liverpool could have done with someone like Diogo Jota just popping up with a couple of goals at certain points and just dragging them through games, because he did do that last season. There was a good number of matches where he scored the opening goal. It was something like 8 or 9 games, I think, last season where he scored the opener, and then Liverpool went on to win. And we've seen so many times this season they've gone behind and struggled to turn things around. So I do think there's a big sort of conundrum to solve, really. I think, obviously, if Liverpool are in European competition next season, you're not going to just have a front three and that's it, and the other two are substitutes. They're going to use all of these players, but it's really tough to pick, I think, which one you'd go for. It is kind of a game by game thing, but I think in terms of your point about Diogo Jota, he's probably the one that needs to play every single game to get into a rhythm. I think maybe you can drop the other two in and kind of see where they go from there. With Jota, it does feel like he needs a run of games, but almost a bit like Curtis Jones, like I mentioned before. I'm not quite sure that these players that you think maybe need that momentum and need to play every single match, I'm just not quite sure where that run of games is going to come from, because as much as Liverpool's squad has been stretched at times this season, there are still lots of midfield options to pick from for Jones, and obviously Jota has got plenty of competition as well. So yeah, it's a real tricky one to know what Liverpool do, short and long term, I think, in terms of that forward line. But yeah, look, whichever way they go, I wouldn't be against it. If Diogo Jota started a few games in a row, I certainly wouldn't say no to that.
Well, that forward line is about to be bolstered. Obviously, Luis Diaz finally making his return from that injury, which I think he was suffering. Was it in October against Arsenal? I think it was. So he's been out for quite some time. Jurgen Klopp saying he's definitely going to be in the squad tonight. Are you expecting to maybe see him off the bench as opposed to in the starting 11?
Yeah, definitely off the bench. I think he'll probably be only for 5 or 10 minutes, I would have thought, for tonight, and maybe slowly build that up over the next few weeks. But I think, in terms of that European race or top 4 race or whatever you want to call it that Liverpool are in, I think, no other team in that race has got a player as good as Luis Diaz to come back. And if Liverpool can just get one winning goal from him or one big moment between now and the end of the season, that'll be, a big boost for them. And I do think he can have a role to play, and I think falls into the similar sort of category to Jota, in that you just want the end of this season to be positive for him so that he can sort of roll that into next season. But I do think he can have a real tangible impact. I know probably about 6 weeks ago that Jurgen Klopp was talking about him coming back and being able to play 9 or 10 games and have a real impact. I do think that can be the case. And, as much as Darwin Núñez has done well on the left, and Liverpool have obviously struggled, I don't think it's necessarily that Luis Diaz would have played and everything would have been different, but he certainly would have helped so far this season for Liverpool. He was arguably the best player before he got injured. He was certainly one of those players that can just, a bit like Jota, just come up with something out of nothing. And I think for Liverpool to have him back, I think it will be a big step in the right direction. But yeah, I'm not placing too many high expectations on him over the next few weeks. I think if we do see him, it's going to be a little bit to start with, and slowly that will build up, and hopefully he can come back and hit the ground running. I mean, I know, for example, that Liverpool's coaching staff were really impressed with him when he came back that first time after the first injury. Obviously, he was out from October to December and then got another injury as soon as he came back. I know that the first training session that he took part in the Dubai training camp, wasn't it, that they had during the World Cup, they were really excited about him and how sharp he looked and how fresh he looked. So hopefully that is the case again. But yeah, it's been about 6 months, hasn't it, that he's been out, and I think it will be probably a similar situation to Harvey Elliott last season when he came out. I think people maybe expected a little bit too much from him in terms of how much he was going to play. Obviously eased him back in and has then been able to play every game this season. So yeah, it's exciting to have him back, but I don't expect that we'll see him for more than 5 or 10 minutes tonight.
Yeah, he's been a massive miss this season. And as you said, who knows what kind of an impact he can have now. You drop him back in the team for this run of 9 games. Obviously, we dropped him into the team in January last season and we nearly won a quadruple. So who's to say Liverpool couldn't go on and qualify for top 4 with him in that side again. But that is all we've got time for tonight. Hopefully it's a good display from Liverpool at Elland Road, and all 3 points are coming back to Liverpool with us. But that's, as I say, all we've got time for. So thanks from myself and Matt, and we'll catch you next time.